Hi y'all, welcome back to Sentro School. Today we'll be learning how to bind off part of a row on your Sentro projects, and we're going to be doing this while our projects are still on the machine, so there's no need to take your project off the machine, bind off some stitches, and then put it back on. Binding off stitches while your project is still on the machine can be a little awkward, but luckily it's not too difficult. Something to keep in mind is that you can only bind off stitches starting at the beginning of a row. You can't do this at the end of a row. So grab your crochet hook and your loom pick, and let's get started. I'll show y'all how to bind off stitches on both sides of this panel, but we're gonna start with the right side just because it's a little bit easier for me since I'm right-handed. So we're starting at the beginning of this row and we're gonna bind off 3 stitches. So first thing we need to do is take our yarn out of the yarn and tension guides and just hold it out of the way of your needles here. Then grab your loom pick and grab this first stitch off of its needle. Then take your crochet hook and you're gonna insert the hook into this loop with the hook pointed towards the center of the machine, just like that. Then you can remove your loom pick. And for this first stitch here, we are just going to wrap our yarn around our crochet hook and bring it through the loop. So this is our first knit stitch. This is not our first bind off stitch. Then crank the handle of your machine until the next needle pops up and you can grab the next stitch off of its needle. And then insert your crochet hook, it's a little awkward, into that loop. Again, the same direction that you inserted your crochet hook into that first loop. And here is where we'll do our first bind off stitch. So you should have 2 loops on your hook right now, and you're just gonna wrap your working yarn around your crochet hook again, and this time instead of bringing it through one loop, you're gonna bring it through both loops on your hook. And that is our first bound off stitch. So now let's do it again. Pop up the next needle, grab the stitch with your loom pick, insert your crochet hook, and bring the yarn through both loops. That's our second bind off stitch, and we want to do 3, so we're going to do 1 more. Grab this stitch with your loom pick, insert your crochet hook, and bring the working yarn through both loops. And then I am going to crank the handle of my machine a little bit more just so it's easier for me to put this loop back on. So put it back on the needle, and then you can put your yarn back through the yarn and tension guides, and you don't need to wrap your yarn around this way so that it goes under this first hook. You're actually just going to basically skip this first little pin here and put your yarn through the yarn and tension guides because we've already made the first stitch of this row. So we can knit to the other side, and I will show y'all how to do this on the left side of your project. So here we are at the beginning of this row, and we're going to do exactly the same thing that we just did. It's just in the opposite direction. So we can keep this pretty brief because we already went over it on this side. So first things first, take your yarn out of the yarn and tension guides. Hold it out of the way. Crank the handle of your machine until you can grab this first stitch. Grab it off of its needle with your loom pick. Take your crochet hook and insert it into the loop with your crochet hook pointed towards the center of the machine. Then you can remove your loom pick, and here it's just a little more awkward because I am not left-handed, but it's the same thing. Wrap your yarn around your hook and do your best to bring it through the loop on your hook. There. So this is our first knit stitch. This is not our first bind off stitch. Then crank the handle of your machine until the next needle pops up. Grab that stitch, insert your crochet hook, and bring the yarn through both loops on your hook. And there is your first bound off stitch. And we're gonna do 3 bind off stitches, just the same as we did on the other side. So we have to do 2 more. So grab the next stitch off of its needle, insert your crochet hook, and bring the yarn through both loops on your hook. That's our second bound off stitch. Now one more time, grab the stitch off of its needle, insert your hook, and bring the yarn through both loops on your hook. So there we've bound off 3 stitches, so we can go ahead and put this loop back on its needle. And we don't need to knit this first stitch here because we technically already did that. So put your yarn back through the yarn and tension guides after this first pin, and you're ready to knit. And here's what these bound off stitches look like on the panel once it's off the machine. So we've essentially created these stark lines of decreases, and you'll probably want to do this whenever you need to decrease a lot of stitches at one time. For example, to create some neckline shaping or armhole shaping. You can also decrease on the Sentro, and I do have a tutorial for that I can link, but this is just easier and makes more sense if you need to get rid of a lot of stitches at once. And one last thing I wanted to mention before we go is that your bind off is going to feel a bit tighter than the rest of your knit fabric, so just make sure you do your bind off sort of loosely so that you still have a little bit of give here in the bind off. So that's all I have for y'all today. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, then remember to give it a like and consider subscribing for more Sentro videos. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!